Good afternoon, everybody from the UK. Good evening to those people who perhaps are overseas. I think I've seen somebody say hello from Australia already. So lovely to have you all here today for this webinar. I'm going to be talking all about Chartered Manager. My name is Carol Nichols. I am the Membership Operations Manager here at CMI. And part of my role is managing the small but perfectly formed team who provide all of the support that sits behind the Chartered Manager Award. So I'm excited to have you all on the call today. We've got quite a lot of ground to cover over the next kind of 45 minutes or so. I'll be talking about what Chartered Manager is and some of the benefits about the award. I'll be talking about eligibility. And I'll be talking you through the process for awards. So how that flows, what the application looks like. I'll be talking in a little bit of detail about what the application itself is requiring you to provide. We'll talk about criteria and assessment. There will be time for questions at the end, but please feel free. You can submit them into the chat to the side of the screen here, and I'll be picking up questions at the end. Also, just to confirm that after today's session, we will send the slides and the recording so that you can revisit, rewatch, and make sure that you've got all the detail you need to hand. So without further ado, I'm supported today by my colleague Craig behind the scenes, and he's going to be driving the slides for me. So thank you, Craig. You've moved that forward. So I suppose to kick off today's session, it's really about chatting through what exactly Chartered Manager is. So the slide here identifies what Chartered Manager status is. And as you're dialing into this masterclass, there's a good chance that you may already have some idea of what the answer is to this. But as per the slide, we're talking here about it being a gold standard benchmark. It's all about your achievements as a manager and recognizing those achievements. So Chartered Manager is not a qualification. You don't have to study modules or complete a qualification in order to achieve Chartered Manager. You're not signing up to an extended registration period in order to complete your Chartered Award at the end of that registration process. Chartered Manager uses CMI's professional standard framework, which I'm going to talk about in a few slides' time, but it uses that framework, and the assessment explores how you have met and potentially how you've exceeded that standard, that framework. You're assessed on your skills, so it's all about how you apply your skills. It's about your achievements, what you personally deliver for your business, and you're bringing examples of how you have done those things to life. That forms part of your application. You're assessed on how your skills and those achievements, how they've delivered for your business. So, but also perhaps how you have impacted on the people that work around you. So it could be about your stakeholders, it could be colleagues, it could be the team that work immediately with you, it could be the wider business, the wider organisation. Through our Royal Charter, CMI is the only body that's able to award Chartered Manager status and the Chartered Manager post-nominal letters that go with that. For anyone who's not familiar with exactly what that means, you're able to use post-nominal letters after your name once you are chartered. I want to talk a little bit about the potential impact of Chartered Manager. So if we move on to the next slide. So you may be asking, what will the impact be on me if I decide to go ahead with Chartered Manager? Well, we've completed previous research. This is surveying people who'd been through the process to achieve award. And there's some interesting statistics that pulls back. It's suggesting a huge factor is around self-confidence and self-awareness. So lots of us may struggle perhaps with imposter syndrome, or perhaps we lack confidence or have taken a knock of our confidence in the workplace, maybe as a result of having a poor manager ourselves. Or it might be that not having or taking time to reflect on what we achieve and how. So we move on to the next goal or the next objective. We don't take the time to celebrate our success or to understand, how did that success come about? What was it that I did that impacted, that delivered those results, and why and how are they so far reaching within the organisation? Well, Chartered Manager can help you hit that reset button. So part of the process is about focusing on self-reflection. It's taking stock. It's reflecting on what you have achieved, how you have applied your skills, and the impact and the results that has delivered for your business. So that might also read into, how do you replicate your success? How do you identify challenges that you may want to avoid the next time you're posed in a similar situation? It's about making best use of your skills, spotting opportunities to build or to improve. You can also get a sense of perhaps renewed motivation, reinvigorating how you feel motivated. So gaining the award can be a direct impact on your own managerial practice. You decide when the time is right for you to get chartered. So for some people, it's once they're already where they want to be in their career. So it reflects and it recognises perhaps the culmination of achievements, and that might be over a period of time. For other people, it may be when they're looking for a fresh role or a fresh challenge. And in that instance, Chartered Manager can help you stand out from the crowd. It can help you articulate the skills that you have, that you deliver for your organisation, and be able to identify how those same set of skills could be brought into any new role or with any new employer. But it's not just about an impact on you. So if we move to the next slide, we also identify that Chartered Manager, through you, can have an impact on your organisation. So when you are delivering, when you are able to identify the difference, the impact, the positive results that you've delivered for your business, well, the organisation is also winning in that instance. So through reflection, you're pinpointing what delivers for the business. You know how and when to use your skills for best results. Whether that's delivering to the bottom line, so that could be about income, it could be about something that reads into the monetary side of the business. Could also be, on the flip side, it could be about perhaps increased efficiency, so something that ultimately saves on costs, still reads to the bottom line, but in a slightly different way. Could be that you identify things that link to employee satisfaction, something that perhaps reduces churn within your organisation or within roles across your organisation. There is an opportunity. So if you decide to go forward with Chartered Manager, it may be that your organisation is willing to fund you to complete the award process. We can provide a budget request template if that's something that you would like to be able to put forward to perhaps to your manager or to somebody within your organisation who is responsible for development and training budgets and so on. If you are the person responsible for learning and development in your organisation, or if you've joined today's session to understand how Chartered Manager could be relevant for a group of your managers, we can run workshops. We can look at activity similar to this masterclass in order to talk to that particular group of people. If that's something you want, then please do reach out to our team. I'll be giving all of our contact details at the end of today's webinar. We'd be more than happy to have a discussion with you. If we move forward, let's talk about eligibility for Chartered Manager. So if you have a look on screen, this should help you plot yourself on a route to award. So this tends to be the first question that we ask. What we need to understand is, what mix of qualifications and experience do you have? For those people who've completed a relevant CMI specific qualification, the fast track route option may apply. For our full assessment route, and that's really what I'm going to focus on in today's session. So for our full assessment route, you would need one of the following. You would either need to have 5 or more years of experience if you don't have a management qualification, or if you do have a degree level qualification that's management or business focused, then you'd need a minimum of 3 years management experience alongside that. If you have all that and more, and perhaps if you have a role with strategic responsibility, then you could still come through our full assessment route, but ultimately be aiming to become a chartered fellow with CMI. So that would recognise the more extended management experience and strategic responsibility that you hold. So that's the gateway. If you move forward with Chartered Manager, you'd get into detail to prove the impact you've made as a manager and so on. So if we move to the next slide, I mentioned at the outset around our professional standards. And Chartered Manager is underpinned by CMI's professional standard. grounded in 75 years of management and leadership expertise. This standard framework was developed in consultation with professionals, with managers and leaders. It's a tool for anyone looking to develop high quality skills and capabilities. And the application for Chartered Manager covers the 3 top levels and also the subcategories that you can see in the wheel image on screen. Assessment criteria and our assessment approach reference back to this standard. So it's very much focus of what we are looking to explore and understand about any candidate that comes forward for the Chartered Manager Award. Now, linked to that, if we move to the next slide, we have a management diagnostic. It's one of our newer member resources that has been developed in line with the professional standard. And again, it is reading back to those top level sections and the specific subheadings that are linked here within the professional standard. If you're a member of CMI, then you can complete this management diagnostic to understand your readiness for Chartered Manager. There are 3 levels to the diagnostic. There is a junior, a middle, and a senior manager diagnostic. It's a self-assessment questionnaire, so you're really answering a series of statements about yourself. It's focusing on your knowledge and your experience, but it gives you the opportunity, if you complete either the middle or the senior manager diagnostic, as you complete each statement, you're able to think about perhaps examples. So in responding to a particular statement, what example do you have of how you use or have applied that particular approach or met that particular requirement? You keep some notes around that. These are things that can be directly relevant when you come to put your Chartered Manager application together. Now, once you complete the diagnostic, you'll receive a fully personalised learning plan. So it comes up with the responses that you've given. It identifies perhaps those areas where you have scored yourself quite highly, so where perhaps you are stronger in your skills, but it can equally identify any areas where there might be development opportunities, and it will provide you with a link to development that you can go away and complete. So you can fill any skills gaps if it finds them. But it also, as I say, forms the basis of your Chartered Manager application. It can help you in thinking about the detail that you provide into the application form itself. It can also be about future CPD. So one of the areas that we will look at, I will come on to, is all about, within the application, it's about what your plan is for future CPD. And again, that diagnostic can provide you with some thoughts around what that might look like. If we move to the next slide, let me talk a little about the process, so what's involved. So if you're interested in going forward and applying for Chartered Manager status, you start off by contacting our Chartered Manager team. So we can then understand your experience and advise you on which route you're able to take to complete the award. At that point, you can start looking at preparing your application. And the good news is we're here to help with that. So we can't give you all the answers, but we have got weekly drop-in sessions. We can also have one-to-one calls. So if there's something you want to discuss in a little bit more detail, just reach out to the team and we can help with that. You'll also find that there's a candidate support pack that's provided through to you. So at the point you're starting to look at your application, you've got an additional document that sits to the side, which you can reference to understand what are the details that we're looking for within the application itself. Once you're happy, once you've got your submission drafted, then you send it through to us and we will assign it to an assessor. That assessor is going to review your application. So they're looking at what you've put in writing. They're making a note of the things that they would want to discuss with you to drill down into a bit more detail. And they're going to organise with you a date for a professional discussion to talk through your achievements, to talk through the application, the detail that you've provided. They're looking to make sure that you can bring that to life. So if they're looking at what you've captured in writing, now it's about how do you own that? How do you take that to the next level and really help them understand what you have done, how you have applied your skills and your knowledge and the results that have been achieved from that. So from the professional discussion, the assessor is then making a decision. Have you met all of the criteria? And they're recommending a result. Potentially that goes forward to be moderated. So we do have a sampling process where a proportion of applications will go through a moderation. You would get confirmation of that's happening. And then ultimately the result of your assessment would be confirmed through to you from our central team here at CMI. So that's the overview of the process. If we move on to look at the specifics of the application. So on the next slide, let's look at part 1. So part 1 of the application form. This is all about background to you, to your role, but also your career story. So as part of the process, you'll need a sponsorship letter, as is identified on screen here. This would ordinarily be, this is somebody that you perhaps would report into, or senior manager or leader within your organisation. It might be another chartered manager. It might be somebody within your network who's chartered with another professional body. This is about, that sponsorship letter is about providing a perspective from somebody else of how you meet those criteria that are within the professional standards, those top 3 levels of the professional standard. That you can find out more online. There's something also in the support pack, but we have also created a short support document that can be provided to the person that you ask to be your sponsor, so that they can understand what are we asking them to provide and send through to you, because you'll be providing this through to us alongside your completed application form. So this story really is about your current role. So we want to understand more about that, but we also want to understand your management and leadership journey. So we ask you to look at roles that you've held through the last 5 years. Now that might still be the current role that you're in. It could be a previous role within the same organisation. Could be a different employer. That's not a problem. It's all about understanding and you being specific. So help us to understand the breadth of your responsibilities, your current responsibilities, but your previous responsibilities from a management and leadership focus. If you do have voluntary experience, that is something that you can bring into the application. That's a section that's further in the application, and I'll come on to that shortly. If we move to the next slide, so if part 1 is building background, part 2 is very much about you as a manager. So the first question asks you to look at what chartered manager status means to you. This is a short personal statement on why you want to apply, but really why now? What is it that's driven you to think chartered manager is right for me and now is the time for me to undertake the process and to complete the award? The keywords that you can see on the right of the screen, they define our chartered managers. So you might want to think about how those relate to you, how they inspire you to join our chartered community. This section also looks at your role as an ethical and inclusive leader. So you are asked to grade yourself against 5 key criteria, which you can see on screen here. So leading with integrity, championing inclusivity, looking after well-being, prioritising the environment, and committing to sustainability. What you are asked to do within the application form is to identify on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is strong and 1 not quite so confident with, grade yourself. What is your confidence? And what is your level of competence, do you think, against each of these headings? And we're also asking you to provide a specific example against each one of how you demonstrate that particular value. So we're not looking necessarily for you to score yourself, 5 out of 5 across each of these particular statements. We're here, what we're looking for is your self-awareness and how you can talk about how you instill these practices in your day-to-day activity. This forms part of what the assessor will explore with you. They may well want to understand the gradings that you've given yourself, and understand where does that come from, what is the specific example, and how does that read back to the score that you've given yourself in terms of confidence and competence. So that's section 2 of the application. If we move on to section 3, this is where you can showcase your successes. So this is all about what you have delivered. How have you achieved? How have you delivered for your business? And how does that make you a great manager? So 3 areas of the professional standards specifically we're looking at here. So leading change and innovation, managing others, and achieving results. For each of these areas, think big. What are you most proud of? You might want to start with this as the first part of the application that you complete. It's laid out in numerical order, but you're able to complete this. You could do this in one sitting, but you don't have to. If you want to tackle this section by section, you absolutely can. And it's up to you where you start within that application. So you might want to start by thinking, what are the things that I've delivered for my business? What is it that I have really made a difference with? So let's bring that to life. And asking yourself, what am I proud of having achieved? Think recent, so perhaps the last 18 months. What are the things you're proud of? And how would you then flesh that out to give a little bit more detail? So it's important to think not just about what you did, but why you did it and why in that way. How did that have an impact on the outcome that was achieved? So whatever you're talking about in terms of success, how did your approach impact or make a difference to how that was actually achieved, how that outcome was realized? So if you're thinking about managing others, you might talk about working with stakeholders, but don't just say that you worked with them throughout a particular process to achieve an end result. Think about how you identified who that group of stakeholders were. If you changed your approach with different stakeholders, well, what did that look like and why was that something that you decided to do? And how did that have an impact on the outcome? Ultimately, why did that make you a great manager? And that's what this particular section of the application is all about. And you'll need to do that for each of the 3 areas that you can see on screen here. You can use the same example more than once. It could be the same example against each of these 3, but you need to be specific about where it links to this particular statement. If we move on to the next slide, the final part of the submission. So section 4, the first part of section 4 is all about reflective practice. I think it's widely acknowledged by chartered managers that as part of the submission process, that this is the biggest impact. It's the area that has the biggest impact on them going forward. It won't be the reason why somebody decides to become a chartered manager, but taking that time to reflect on what you've achieved, how you went about achieving it, how you applied your skills to realize that end result, but maybe also to understand, as well as what did work, so what would you replicate, what might some of those challenges have been, what lessons potentially have you learned in the approach that you adopted, what might you do differently and why would that be? So that reflection on how the end results are achieved and what you've learned as a result of it is really what we're talking about within this particular section. So you're asked to summarize what reflective practice means to you and how you find the time for reflection in your schedule. You're asked at what your upcoming goals are, how you plan to achieve them and what success looks like for you. Going back to that management diagnostic tool, if you've already done that, you'll know exactly what you need to work on and how to go about it because it will have given you some feedback on development activity and opportunities. If we move on to the next slide, the second element to this particular section of the submission, section 4, and this is all about role modeling. So, and what does good practice look like in terms of management and leadership? So it asks you to look at how you currently role model good practice as a manager and leader, and why is that important for you to give back? So think about things like perhaps coaching and mentoring, how you keep up to date with research in your field, perhaps with new management practices, how you work with other teams and departments, how you work on your communication style. These are all things that you could identify that read into how you are a role model. You're asked to provide one example of how you have been a good role model, and we provide more information on that in the support pack, which will be provided through to you if you register and move forward with Chartered Manager. Once you've done your submission, we move on to the next slide. So you are sending that through. You've drafted all of your responses, provided all of that detail into the application form. You provide that through to the Chartered Manager team here at CMI. When we assign that out to your assessor, what the assessor will be doing, as I said previously, they'll be looking through what you've captured in writing. They'll be making a note of what areas do they think show quite strongly? Are there elements that they want to probe a bit further? What would they want to explore with you? Because they're going to lead into a professional discussion. This is around 1 to 1.5 hours in length. This is an opportunity for you to bring to life your application. So it's a chance for you to talk through your experiences. It's not just a live reading of your submission with some kind of Q&A conversation. It is designed to bring out more context and more information about what you've achieved. Largely, we'd be expecting you to be doing the majority of the talking. Now, have your submission with you. We absolutely recommend that that's something that you bring along to that conversation. Your assessor will be prompting you to talk about the detail you've put into your application. They might ask some specific questions around something that you've referenced or that you've identified, but they want you to bring more detail and explore that with them through the probing questions that they will use. So before you go to your professional discussion, look through your submission, think about the professional standard, think about what questions you might be asked. And logistically, what the assessor will do is contact you to set up a date for your professional discussion. So they'll be looking at a day and a time that works for the both of you. It will be a video call, and you will get a reminder 48 hours before it's due to happen, just so that it's still you're conscious, you're still aware of the fact that your professional discussion is coming up. And that video call is absolutely the opportunity to bring everything to life. It is focused on your application. This is what the assessors are looking to understand and to drill down into more detail. If we move on to the next slide. So in terms of maintaining your Chartered Manager Award, once you've achieved your Chartered Award, then for you to retain it, you need to keep your CMI membership up to date. We also ask you to keep a log of your ongoing continuing professional development, so your CPD activities. We have a process for sampling CPD from our Chartered Managers. It is a random sampling process. So we ask you to keep your CPD log, and if we ask you to provide that through to us as part of our sampling activity, then that's the time to put that into a format, share it through with us so that we can review it. So your CMI membership does give you access to quite a range of CPD resources, so through the Career Development Centre, through our insights, through the Better Managers newsletter, through Management Direct. There is a wealth of resources that can be there to support your CPD activity. If you've completed your management diagnostic, you might well also have some signposted activity from that. But we also look to identify that really CPD can be quite broad. So in terms of the types of activities, we do not prescribe a set number of hours. What we're asking you to do is, when you log your activities, to think about what was the value of each activity you completed and how has that helped you to develop or to further develop your management and leadership skills. But equally, we are very broad in terms of what could constitute CPD. So it could be formal training. It could be something that's structured like a conference or seminars. It could be qualification. There might be something there that you're looking to formally accredit in terms of a qualification. It could be daily activity, got here coaching, mentoring. It could be about secondment. It could be about reading or research. It could be networking. So we look for this to be as broad as it possibly can be. All we're asking you to do is identify what the value of any activity that you've noted into your CPD log, what is the value of that activity? How has it helped you as a manager, as a leader? And it's the outcomes and the outputs rather than the number of hours that you put into the activity that we're interested to understand more about. I think that pretty much draws us to a close on the main detail that I wanted to cover. I think if we move on to the next slide, we're really at the point for any questions. So there's a couple here from Kenny. So Kenny asks, I am an FCMI, that's a fellow of CMI, many years in senior management roles within aerospace and defence. What benefits do you think Chartered Manager will give me? Kenny, I think if you're somebody who 60 years young, you've identified, if you are somebody who has had a lengthy and a strong and successful management career, chartered manager for you may well be more about that pinnacle, being able to identify and get recognition for everything you have done up to that point. It may not be for you that this is about a new opportunity to move into a new role or a new employer, but it absolutely is something that can add to your existing fellow membership for you to aim to become a chartered fellow and get that recognition. There's been success there, and this is what we look to identify. Chartered will be different things to different people depending on type of role they hold, but where they are within their career. So I appreciate, what might be true for you and what would be a driver for you might be different for a different candidate who looks to come forward. You've also asked, is the assessment similar to a competency-based interview? And are there example questions for preparation? It's competency-based insofar as it is underpinned by the professional standard, and that standard openly available on our website. The application form, as you are completing it, each question will have assessment criteria. It'll give you a steer on what the assessor is actually looking for you to provide into your application as you are completing it. And in terms of really what the assessor is looking to explore, those assessment criteria are really the things for you to keep in mind. So there aren't example questions for you to prepare, but if you look at your application and if you look at what the assessment criteria in each question is flagging, that's what the assessor is going to be using. So they will have read what you've put in writing, they will have identified how far they feel that hits the criteria, and any questions that they ask you will be all about how do we ensure that those assessment criteria have been fully hit. So they will use that as a way of steering any questions that they may ask. So I would say refer back to the assessment criteria in that instance. Okay, so Michael has asked a question about what will happen if you fail your professional discussion. Will there be another payment for another professional discussion? So, Michael, this is something that we are exploring at the moment. We are potentially considering whether there is a resit opportunity and what that would look like. The likelihood, it's something that we are discussing at the moment. We haven't yet finalised. The likelihood would be that we would look at those areas of the application where the assessment criteria hadn't been met. So if we asked you to come forward for an additional discussion, it would be focused to specific areas of the application. As to whether there would be another payment, I think that would potentially depend on how wide those gaps may be. If this is something that's going to require quite a bit of detailed additional discussion, there may well be an additional fee. Again, until we have identified exactly what we feel that needs to look like, we're not really in a position to identify what any payment might be. But I think we would look at, depending on how wide the gaps were, would inform what might need to happen if there was an additional payment needed. So I'm just looking at the question from Abhijit. So having worked in multiple organisations and after noticing massive deviation from taught principles during my MBA, I've decided to go solo 3 months ago. What's the scope for a fellow in my circumstances? So if you're talking about how you're approaching your application, this is about how we bring this to life for you within your current context. Now, I did say when we're talking about chartered, and actually the introductory questions really are all about understanding your career, understanding your focus, what your current roles are. Now, it might be that at this point, if you've literally just set up your own business or set yourself up as a solo enterprise, that chartered might be something you want to aim for in a few months' time when you have identified in your current role, what are you delivering? If you're able to already show that, there is nothing stopping you from coming forward for chartered manager right now. You can equally look at, some of your previous roles. So we talk about and we ask for you to think about the successes that you have had, what you have delivered for your business. We talk about the last 18 months. So it doesn't always have to just be in the current role you're in. It can refer back to previous activity, previous roles, if they fall in a timeline that makes sense to the application. We have had people who've looked to come through the process and have identified that perhaps there is a current project that they're working on and they want to use that as the basis of their application. They're not yet in a position to be able to identify the full success perhaps that project has delivered. There might be milestones that can be used, but for some people, they almost use it as a way of looking forward. If this is the project I want to use as the focus for my application, then I'll be driven by the point at which I see those end results being delivered. And that's the time when I come forward. But I can start to think about what are the examples, what are the things that I would want to put in my application whilst that project is still in process, while that's still happening. So I think there is an opportunity. You can take this as I'm looking back at what I've achieved, or you can take this as an opportunity to say, there's something I'm currently doing that I think is going to be key to my application. And I can start thinking about what that might look like, but I might need to wait for a short period of time until I actually see the results being delivered. And then is the time to push to come forward for Chartered Manager. So we've got a question here about qualification from Shumela. So I would like to inquire about diploma level 5 in professional consulting and above, and are they eligible for full assessment? So yes, that would be. If you have, so with a level 5 professional consulting qualification, if you have at least 3 years experience alongside that qualification, then that's when you would be able to come forward for Chartered Manager. Okay, so I've got somebody here who's saying, I've been in a leadership and management role for over 5 years. So I'm currently doing the CMI level 7 diploma in leadership and management. What status is suitable for me? So ultimately, if you complete the CMI level 7 diploma, because it's a CMI specific qualification, then you'd potentially be looking at our fast track route to Chartered Manager. I think you'd also have an opportunity, and I would suggest if you contact the team, we can explore this with you specifically and individually. If you have, so over 5 years, if you had 10 years experience, and if you had strategic responsibility for 3 of those years, then you could potentially look to come through and achieve Chartered Fellow grade, Chartered Fellow award with us. If you don't yet have that experience, and I think this might be something that's relevant to a number of our members, then you would still come through to achieve your Chartered Manager award. But every member, at the point when you do have 10 years management experience, and you do have at least 3 years strategic responsibility, you would be able, if you're already holding the Chartered Manager Award, you would be able to look at upgrading your membership status with us and becoming a Chartered Fellow. And that would not involve recompleting an assessment for Chartered Manager specifically. That would be about then focusing on your experience and the detail that you can provide through. I think we had a couple of pre-prepared questions, or that people had submitted in advance. So if I can ask one of my colleagues to perhaps bring up anything that we had as a pre-submitted. Okay, so how long does the process usually take? Very interesting question. Depends very much on you. Insofar as when you decide that you want to register for Chartered Manager, we will action your registration and we will provide you with the application form and obviously take payment and so on. Timelines at that point are very much about how you approach completing that application in order to send it back to us. So it's about where you can find the time to put your responses into the application and to complete that. So initially, very much the ball is in your court for how long you take. We would suggest there's a reason why at a particular point you decide it's now the right time to register and to apply. Keep that momentum going. So when we provide that application through to you, if you can, get it completed and back to us, say within 4 weeks, within a month, less if you're able to, but there's a reason why now was the right time, and let's make sure that we tap into that. But ultimately, entirely up to you how long that takes. Once you submit that through to us, then we start to look at something that is a bit more defined in terms of timelines. So we will look to have that assigned out to an assessor within 2 to 3 days. What that assessor will do is then have a few days in order to take a look through, to look at the detail you've provided in writing, and they'll reach out to you then to look at when is the right time to have that professional discussion. Now, again, that's something that is agreed between the two of you. So it might be something that you look to do in quite quick succession, but if you're in a particular busy period, it might be that you actually need that to happen, in a week or a few weeks' time. Again, that's something you agree with your assessor. Once the professional discussion itself has happened, then our assessors will complete their paperwork and provide that back through to us. If it's selected as part of a moderation activity, that also is time bound. So we would say ordinarily, from the point of your professional discussion, you would expect to hear your result within 2 to 3 weeks, depending on whether moderation activity is something that needs to happen. So there are parts of the process where we are able to define and to manage the timelines involved, but equally there are parts of the application where it's very much about the time that you need to complete your application, and then when you're looking at a date for your professional discussion, how does that fit between you and the assessor and where it fits into your diaries. So there is flexibility there if it's needed, in terms of what you define that activity to be and when the timelines need to happen. I think we may have a chance for perhaps one more question. I'm conscious of the time. So how do I retain Chartered Manager status? So as I covered, yes, retaining Chartered Manager is all about continuing with your CMI membership, but keeping that log of your CP activity. I should also say, so through the Management Direct area on our website, there is an area within there where you can log CPD if you want to. You do not have to use our tools to do that. So we are often asked if somebody is a member of another professional body and they maybe keep a CPD record for that body, couldn't they use that for Chartered Manager? Absolutely. We are not prescriptive about how and where you have that record. All we ask is, keep your membership up to date, keep a log of the CPD activity that you're completing. If we approach you, then provide that through to us for review. So if you fall into our random sample. I will also say there is if you like, a bit of a grace period. So when you first come through the award, we would not approach you to complete CPD as part of our sampling for at least 12 months. We want to be sure that having gone through the process, you're not being contacted within a matter of weeks or months of achieving it to then say, and now can we have a CPD record? Because you've covered a lot of ground as far as that assessment of your application is concerned. So you would have at least 12 months grace before you would fall into any of our activity around that sampling of CPD. But that's what you then provide, and that's how your record and your chartered award stays up to date. I think at this point, if we can move on, I think just as a final slide, I have some contact details here. So thank you all for your time today. As I said right at the outset, what we will do is email you with the slides, a copy of the recording, so you're able to go back and revisit. If you want to request your application form, if you want to get registered and move forward, then on screen here is our email address. So we have a dedicated email box for Chartered Manager, so cmgr@managers.org.uk. We also have the telephone number on screen there if you want to call and speak to the team. If you're already a member of CMI, then you'll be able to access that management diagnostic tool and begin your self-assessment. And we've got a link there. Again, you'll have that in the slides when they come through to you. If you want to find out a little bit more about the routes to Chartered and the specific application forms, again, they are all openly available on our website. And when we provide the slides through, you'll be able to follow their link there and read and get that additional detail. But if in doubt, if you've got any additional questions, please do contact the team and we'd be more than happy to help.